Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Cold War superpowers. So, World War II ends on September 2nd, 1945. We have the Allied powers of the US, UK, and USSR. They had defeated the Axis powers of Germany and Japan. So, two countries emerged from World War II as international powers: the United States and the United Soviet Socialist Republics. So, how did this happen? Both had independent economies, strong militaries, and the capability to produce nuclear weapons, and remained largely undamaged from the destruction of war. The Cold War begins. The former Allies became engaged in a 45-year long conflict lasting from 1945 to 1991. Each country had a severe distrust of each other. The US worried about Soviet communism spreading. Communism is a political and economic system in which the government owns all production resources, such as businesses and farms. The government then distributes the resources and wealth according to individual need. They were also concerned about leader Joseph Stalin's tyrannical rule of his own country. Here's Joseph Stalin. So now the USSR resented the US delay in entering World War II, which resulted in the deaths of tens of millions of Soviets, and was upset that the US would not recognize the USSR as a legitimate part of the international community. So we have a divided Germany. Germany was devastated by World War II and lacked a stable government. The Allies knew Germany needed help. So Germany was divided into four zones. Each of the allies occupied or controlled one zone. So here you have the Soviets, the English, the French, and the US. The capital of Berlin was deep in USSR controlled territory. Here it is. But it was still divided into four zones, with each of the allies occupying one zone. And here's the map of Berlin, with the Soviets running the red, the British running the gray, the French running the dark blue, and the Americans running the light blue. Further, we have a divided continent. After World War II, the US and USSR knew Europe would struggle to rebuild itself. But US President Harry Truman and Soviet dictator Stalin disagreed on how to help Europe. The US favored democracy, the USSR favored communism. So, Western European countries, including West Germany and West Berlin, had democratic governments. The democratic countries, including the US, became the Western Bloc. The USSR occupied several East European countries after World War II. The USSR instilled communist governments in these countries. The communist countries, including East Germany and East Berlin, became the Eastern Bloc. And thus the Iron Curtain falls. By the start of 1946, Stalin placed the Eastern Bloc under tight restrictions. Citizens could no longer move or travel freely. Former UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill referred to the line that divided Western and Eastern blocs as the Iron Curtain. And you can see here the Iron Curtain being that black line separating the blue and the red. It's pointed out here with the yellow line. Stalin did not want Soviet controlled countries to have open contact with the West and non Soviet controlled countries. The leaders of Western Bloc were fearful that communism would spread. They wanted to contain or prevent the spread of communism. Tensions increased between the US and USSR. So, the US used a policy of containment to prevent the spread of communism. The US did offer aid and troops to countries that were in danger of falling to communism. The US did not fight communism where it already existed. Both the US and USSR competed to be the stronger country and expand global influence. For instance, we have a space race, and an arms race, and proxy wars. So, first, the arms race. The US and USSR wanted to increase their stockpile of nuclear weapons. They wanted to outdo each other, it became a contest. Both countries detonated nuclear weapons to show the other its strength. However, neither country wanted to actually use its nuclear weapons. They knew a direct war with nuclear weapons could destroy the Earth. Instead, they fought each other through proxy wars. Proxy wars, the US and USSR battled each other indirectly. They were fighting each other, but they weren't fighting each other. Each supported an opposing side involved in a war. They provided aid and troops. The US and USSR wanted to further their own agenda. So we have the Korean War. The US supported the South Korea while the USSR supported North Korea and instilled a communist government. The Vietnam War. The US supported non communist South Vietnam while the USSR supported communist North Vietnam. And then we have the space race. Not only did the US and USSR compete with one another for the most powerful nuclear weapons, they also competed for best space exploration and technology. The space race began in 1955. The Soviets put the first man made satellite into orbit in 1957. That is called Sputnik, and it was launched on October 4th, 1957. The Soviets put the first man into space in 1961. Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space on April 12th, 1961. Americans landed the first man on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon, landing on July 20th, 1969. Additionally, the US and USSR competed in sports at the Olympics. They competed in education by going for Nobel Prizes. Anything you can compete with each other with, well, the US and USSR were fighting each other, trying to win. So, years later, the Soviet Union dissolves. The Cold War came to an end on December 24th, 1991. The USSR dissolved. Its economy and government were struggling and its people were unhappy. 15 independent and separate countries emerged, with Russia being the largest. And here's a map of all of those countries. With the collapse of the USSR, the Cold War came to an end. And that is all for this lesson. I will see you next lesson.